ballroom was everything Marcus was not. Crystal chandeliers threw warm gold across the room. Women in floor-length gowns laughed at exactly the right moments. Men in tailored suits gestured with the easy confidence of people who had never once questioned whether they belonged. Somewhere near the bar, a string quartet played something that probably had a French name. Marcus sat alone at a corner table, both hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea, watching all of it like a man observing weather through a window present, but separate. He hadn't wanted to come tonight. He still wasn't sure why he had. He was about to check his phone just to have something to look at when a shadow fell across the table. He looked up. An elderly woman in a deep navy dress stood over him, composed and unhurried as if she had all the time in the world. She leaned down slowly, brought her lips close to his ear, and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I need you to pretend to be my granddaughter's fiancé. Just for tonight." Marcus didn't move. Across the room, the main doors opened. If you want to see how one quiet act of kindness changed everything, stay with me. And if stories like this are your kind of thing, subscribing takes 2 seconds and means you won't miss what comes next. Marcus had been talked into tonight by a coworker named Greg, who had described the event as a good networking opportunity, and then promptly disappeared into the crowd the moment they walked through the door. That had been 40 minutes ago. Since then, Marcus had found a corner table, ordered tea because the cocktails had names he couldn't pronounce, and settled into the particular kind of stillness he had gotten very good at over the past 4 years. The stillness of a man who had learned that the quietest person in the room was also the easiest to overlook, and that being overlooked most of the time was fine. He was 38 years old. He had a 7-year-old daughter named Lily, who was currently at her grandmother's house, probably refusing to go to sleep. He had a job he was good at, but didn't love an apartment that was clean because Lily kept leaving her drawings on every surface, and he'd learned to work around them and a social life that had slowly, steadily contracted over the years until it fit neatly into the space between school drop-offs and bedtime routines. His ex-wife Dana had called him too comfortable once. Said it like it was a diagnosis. "You're too comfortable, Marcus. You don't want anything enough." He hadn't argued. He'd learned by then that arguing with Dana was like trying to reason with a verdict that had already been handed down. What she'd meant, he understood later, was that he didn't want the same things she wanted. The bigger apartment, the dinner parties, the curated version of a life that looked a certain way from the outside. Marcus had never been able to pretend that those things mattered to him, and in the end, that honesty had cost him his marriage. He didn't hate her for it. He just got tired of explaining himself. So he sat with his tea watching the room the way he always watched rooms he didn't belong in, quietly without judgment, just noticing. The couple near the window who were smiling at each other for the cameras but hadn't actually spoken in 20 minutes. The man by the bar checking his watch every 4 minutes. The woman in red laughing a half-second too late at everything the man beside her said. He was in the middle of noticing all of this when he saw her. Not Vanessa, not yet. The older woman. She was standing near the entrance hall, one hand resting lightly on the back of a chair, watching the room with the focused attention of someone conducting a quiet assessment. She was elegantly dressed, silver-haired, and carried herself with the kind of stillness that didn't come from age, but from a lifetime of deciding exactly how much of herself to give any room she walked into. What caught Marcus's attention was her expression. Beneath all that composure, something was working behind her eyes. Not panic, too controlled for that, but worry. The specific, helpless worry of someone who loves a person they cannot protect. She looked at the crowd. Then she looked at him. He expected her to look away. People in rooms like this one always looked away from him eventually. Not with hostility, just with the quiet recalibration of people who had sorted him into a category and moved on. She didn't look away. She crossed the room and sat down across from him. "I apologize for interrupting," she said. Her voice was measured, unhurried. "My name is Eleanor. I've been watching this room for the past 15 minutes trying to find the right person, and I believe you might be him." Marcus set down his cup. The right person for what? Eleanor folded her hands on the table. My granddaughter is going to walk through those doors in approximately 5 minutes. Her name is Vanessa. She is intelligent, accomplished, and one of the strongest people I know, and tonight, through no fault of her own, she is walking into a situation designed to humiliate her. She paused. Her former boyfriend is here. His name is Damien. He ended their relationship 3 months ago, and he has made it his quiet project to ensure that everyone in this room sees her arrive alone tonight. Why? Marcus asked. Because he is the kind of man, Eleanor said simply, who needs to win even after the game is over. Marcus said nothing. Eleanor continued. I'm not asking you to pretend to be someone you're not. I'm asking you to stand next to her, to be present, to make it clear to anyone watching that she is not alone. She looked at him steadily. I don't need someone wealthy or polished or impressive. I need someone decent enough to stand beside a woman he doesn't know and treat her like she matters. That's all. Marcus looked down at his tea. She doesn't know you're doing this. No. So when she walks in and sees a stranger standing next to her, she'll be confused, Eleanor said, possibly angry with me. But she won't be standing alone in front of Damien and 20 people who are waiting to watch her face when she realizes what tonight was designed to be. She held his gaze. I've made worse trades. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about all the very reasonable things he could say. That he was the wrong person. That he didn't know these people. That a stranger pretending to be someone's fiancé in a room full of people who knew better was more likely to make things worse than better. He thought about all of that. And then Eleanor said, She has been carrying things alone for a long time. I just don't want tonight to be one more night she has to do it. Something in Marcus went very still. He knew that sentence. Not the words exactly, but the weight of it. The particular exhaustion of being the person who handles things, who stays steady, who doesn't let anyone see the moment when steady becomes hard. He had lived inside that sentence for 4 years. He knew exactly what it felt like to walk into a room and already know you were going to have to carry it alone. He didn't say any of that. He just said, What do I need to know about her? Eleanor's expression shifted, not relief exactly, but something quieter than that. Like a breath she had been holding for a while. She told him quickly Vanessa was 35, worked in architecture, had been with Damien for 2 years before he ended things in a way that was technically civil and completely designed to diminish her. Damien was charming, well-connected, and had spent the past 3 months subtly repositioning the narrative of their relationship so that everyone in their shared social circle understood, without being told directly, that Vanessa was the lesser half of what they'd been. Tonight, Eleanor said, was supposed to be her walking in here alone and confirming everything he's been implying. What does he look like? Marcus asked. Tall, dark suit. He'll be the one watching the door. Marcus nodded slowly. He pushed back his chair and stood up. He straightened his jacket, the one that wasn't quite right for this room, that he'd known wasn't quite right when he put it on that morning, and he looked at Eleanor. One thing, he said. When I'm standing next to her, I'm not going to make her feel like she's part of a performance. If she wants me to back off, I back off. Her call, not yours. Eleanor looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression shifted this time towards something that might have been reassessment. Agreed, she said. Marcus walked with her toward the center of the room. He was aware in a distant way of how little sense this made. He was a man who had come to a party alone, who didn't know anyone here, who had been sitting in a corner hoping no one would talk to him. He was not the person you called when you needed someone to walk into the middle of a social landmine and come out the other side with his dignity intact. But he also knew what it meant to be the only person standing in your own corner. And he knew that sometimes the only reason a person kept ending up alone in their corner was simply that no one had ever thought to walk over. He reached Eleanor's side just as the main doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open, and Vanessa walked in. She walked in the way people do when they've spent the drive over rehearsing how they're going to walk in chin-level, shoulders back, expression neutral enough to pass as calm. Vanessa was tall, dressed in a deep burgundy gown that she wore with the ease of someone who had long stopped thinking about how she looked and started thinking about how she moved. Her hair was pulled back. Her jaw was set. She was bracing for something. Marcus could see it in the half-second before she scanned the room, the small, controlled intake of breath, the way her eyes moved quickly to the left where Damien was standing with a group of 4 people already watching the door. Already watching her. Damien was exactly where Eleanor had said he'd be. Tall, dark suit, the particular ease of a man who had never once doubted his right to take up space. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching, and the watching was enough. Vanessa saw him. Her pace didn't break, but something behind her eyes did a tiny, almost invisible fracture, the kind that only appeared for a second before a person who'd had a lot of practice at composure sealed it back over. She kept walking. Then Eleanor stepped forward. "Vanessa." Her voice was warm, unhurried, the voice of a woman who was not doing anything unusual at all. "You look beautiful. Come. There's someone I'd like you to meet." Vanessa's eyes moved from her grandmother to Marcus. She stopped. The look she gave him was not hostile. It was worse than hostile. It was the precise, measuring look of a woman who had immediately understood exactly what was happening and was now deciding in real time how she felt about it. Her grandmother had recruited a stranger. This stranger was now standing in front of her with what he hoped was a neutral expression. The entire thing had been arranged without her knowledge or consent, and they both knew it. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't reach out a hand or perform any of the gestures that might have made this feel like a setup she was supposed to be grateful for. He just looked at her and said quietly enough that only she could hear, "I know this isn't what you expected. You don't owe me anything, not a performance, not a conversation, not even a name. If you want me to turn around and walk back to my corner table, I'll do it right now, and no one has to know this happened." Vanessa looked at him for a long moment. Then she glanced past him toward the left side of the room where Damien had now said something to the woman beside him and was watching with the focused patience of someone waiting for a scene to play out exactly as written. She looked back at Marcus. "Your name," she said. "Marcus. How much did she tell you?" "Enough to say yes, not enough to pretend I know you." Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, not yet, but the faintest loosening of the guard, the way a door doesn't open but stops being held shut. "Fine," Vanessa said. "But if you embarrass me, I will make it very clear to this entire room that I've never seen you before in my life." "Fair enough," Marcus said. Eleanor, who had been standing slightly behind him with the expression of someone watching a negotiation she had correctly predicted would resolve itself, touched Vanessa's arm briefly and then drifted away into the crowd with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew when to exit. They stood together near the edge of the room, not quite close enough to announce themselves as a couple, not quite far enough apart to announce themselves as strangers. It was an awkward middle distance, and for the first few minutes neither of them did much to close it. "Can I get you something to drink?" Marcus asked. Vanessa glanced at him. "Sparkling water." He came back with sparkling water for her and another tea for himself, which made her raise an eyebrow. "Tea," she said. "I don't drink," he said. "Not at parties where I don't know anyone." "You don't know anyone here." "Exactly." She almost smiled. Not quite. From across the room, Marcus was aware of Damien's group watching them with the calibrated casualness of people trying to appear as if they weren't watching. One of the women in the group, blonde, sharp-featured, the kind of person who relayed social information quickly, had already leaned in to say something to the man beside her. Marcus could feel the shift in the room's attention, the way you felt a change in air pressure before a storm. Nothing loud. Just a reorientation. "Your ex is watching," he said. "He's been watching since I walked in," Vanessa said without looking over. "That's why he came. He came specifically to watch you arrive alone." "He came," she said carefully. because for the past 3 months, he has been very quietly, very politely making sure that everyone in this room understands a particular version of our relationship. And tonight was supposed to be the evidence. She took a sip of her water. An elegant woman arriving alone to a party full of people who know her story. It completes the picture. What picture? She looked at him, then really looked at him for the first time without the defensive assessment layered over it. That I was the one who needed him, not the other way around. Marcus nodded slowly. He understood the mechanics of it, not from this world, not from rooms like this one, but from the quieter, more ordinary version of the same game. The way a narrative could be built without a single lie. Just emphasis, just omission. Just letting people draw the conclusion you'd already pre-built the frame for. Is it working? He asked. The picture? Vanessa was quiet for a moment. It was, she said, before tonight. They moved through the room gradually the way people do when they're not trying to be conspicuous. Marcus was not a natural at this. He was too direct, too uninterested in performance. But he found that the things that made him bad at social display were unexpectedly the things that worked best here. He didn't try to impress the people they spoke to. He didn't tell stories designed to position himself. He just listened, and occasionally said something that was true, and let Vanessa carry the parts of the conversation that required navigating the specific social architecture of a world he didn't belong to. She was good at it. He noticed that. She knew exactly how to hold a conversation that communicated warmth while revealing nothing, how to redirect without appearing to redirect, how to respond to the barely veiled curiosity about Marcus with a lightness that made further questioning feel somehow impolite. She was very good at this, and it had probably cost her a great deal to get that good. At some point, Marcus couldn't have said exactly when the conversation between them stopped being about managing the room and started being something else. It happened gradually. A comment he made about the string quartet that surprised her. A question she asked about his work that she'd expected to be polite and turned out to be genuine. A small observation about the couple near the window, the one Marcus had noticed earlier, that made her turn quickly and then look back at him with an expression that said she had noticed the same thing and hadn't expected him to. "You've been watching people this whole time," she said. "I got here early," he said. "I didn't have much else to do." "What did you notice about me before my grandmother came over?" He considered lying, decided against it. "I noticed her first. She was watching the room like she was looking for something specific. Then she looked at me and didn't look away, which most people do." He paused. "You I didn't see until you walked in. And then I could see that you already knew what you were walking into." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "Was it that obvious?" "Only if you were looking for it." She turned her glass slowly in her hands. Around them, the party continued its steady hum, music, laughter, the clink of glassware. But in the small space of their conversation, something had gone quieter than that. "Why did you say yes?" she asked. "My grandmother asked a complete stranger to play a role in something that had nothing to do with him. Most people would have said no." Marcus thought about giving her the easy answer. That he was a nice person, that he felt bad for her, that it seemed like the right thing to do. All of it would have been partially true and completely insufficient. Instead, he said, "She told me you'd been handling things on your own for a long time. I know what that adds up to. Not in this world, not with any of this." He gestured slightly at the room, but in general. The way it quietly costs you. The way you stop expecting anyone to show up because you've had so much practice being the only one who does. He stopped. "I didn't want to be another person who looked the other way." Vanessa didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter. "She shouldn't have told you that." "Probably not," he agreed. "It's not—" She started, then stopped. Started again. "I'm not fragile. I wasn't going to fall apart if I walked in here alone." "I know," Marcus said. "That's not why I said yes." She looked at him. I said yes, he said, because you shouldn't have had to. It was another 20 minutes before Vanessa asked the question he'd been waiting for. They had stepped away from the main floor toward a quieter stretch of wall near one of the side corridors, the kind of space that existed in large rooms for people who needed a moment outside the performance of being there. The crowd noise was softer here. The light was slightly warmer. She arranged this without telling me, Vanessa said. It wasn't quite a question. She approached me, Marcus said. I was sitting at a corner table. I think she picked me because I was the only person in the room who wasn't trying to be anything. Vanessa absorbed this. She didn't tell me. No. She was trying to protect me. Her tone was careful, not angry, not exactly. Something more complicated than anger. She saw what was coming and she went and found a stranger and asked him to. She stopped, pressed her lips together. She loves you, Marcus said simply. I know she does. Vanessa turned her glass in her hand again, a gesture he'd noticed she made when she was thinking. I've spent a long time not needing to be protected. I got good at it. And now she stopped again. She didn't protect you, Marcus said. She made sure you weren't alone. Those aren't the same thing. Vanessa looked at him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then slowly, something in her face changed, not in a dramatic way, not in any way that would have been visible from across the room. Just a small, quiet loosening. The expression of a person who has been holding something at arm's length and has just for a second let it come a little closer. You didn't have to stay, she said. After you found out what was actually happening, you could have just walked away. I could have, he said. Why didn't you? Marcus looked at her for a moment. The honest answer was that he wasn't entirely sure that somewhere in the past 2 hours, the line between doing something for a stranger and doing something because he genuinely wanted to had shifted in a way he hadn't planned for and wasn't ready to name yet. So he said the part he was sure of. Because by the time I understood what was happening, I was already more interested in how it turned out than I was in having a reason to leave. Vanessa held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked away toward the main room, and something in her expression returned to the careful, composed version, but softer than it had been at the start of the evening. We should go back in, she said. Whenever you're ready, Marcus said. They returned to the main floor, and for a while things were almost easy. Almost. Marcus was aware, even as the evening settled into something calmer, of the specific quality of Damien's attention from across the room. It wasn't aggressive, it was patient, the patience of someone waiting for a particular outcome, recalibrating when it didn't arrive on schedule but not yet abandoning it. He was aware, too, of the shift happening inside himself. He had come into this evening as someone doing a favor. That framing had made it manageable. There was a clear role, a clear boundary, a clear moment when the evening would end, and he would go back to being who he was before Eleanor had sat down across from him. A man with a corner table and a cup of tea and a life that fit neatly into the space available. But somewhere in the past 2 hours, the favor had stopped being the point, and that was a problem. Not because of anything Vanessa had done, she hadn't done anything. She had simply been exactly who she was, which was the problem. Marcus had enough self-awareness to recognize the specific danger of a person who was exactly who they were. You couldn't dismiss it or talk yourself out of it. It just sat there being true while you tried to find a reason to look away. He told himself the things that were also true. He didn't belong in this world. He was a single father from a 2-bedroom apartment who drove a 6-year-old Accord and had spent the last 4 years turning down every social invitation that didn't involve Lily or work. Whatever this evening had been, it had been an evening. The sane conclusion was to let it be that and nothing more. He was telling himself this with moderate success when Damien moved. He crossed the room with a glass of wine in one hand and a smile that was designed to appear spontaneous, the entrance of a man arriving at something casual, unplanned. He stopped just inside the radius of their conversation, and his gaze moved from Vanessa to Marcus, with the smooth, unhurried quality of someone who had already decided what was going to happen. "Vanessa," he said, "you look great. I didn't realize you were bringing someone tonight." His tone was warm, welcoming even. That was the craft of it, the way the words themselves were completely harmless, and the implication underneath was not. "Marcus," Vanessa said without missing a beat. "This is Damien." Marcus extended a hand. Damien shook it firmly, briefly, the handshake of a man taking a measurement. "I don't think we've met," Damien said pleasantly. "How do you two know each other?" "We met through family," Marcus said. Damien nodded slowly, as if considering this. He looked at Vanessa with an expression of polite curiosity that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't think I've heard her mention you." "I don't think she mentions everything to you anymore," Marcus said. It was a quiet line, not hostile, just accurate, delivered with the same calm that Marcus brought to everything, the stillness that was not performance, but just how he was. Damien's smile held, but something behind it recalculated. He stayed for another 2 minutes, keeping the conversation light, touching nothing directly, and then excused himself back to his group. Marcus watched him go and noticed the moment Damien leaned toward the blonde woman beside him, the one who had been relaying things all evening, and said something while his eyes drifted briefly back across the room. Back to Marcus. Back to the corner where Marcus had been sitting alone with his tea before Eleanor had appeared. Damien had been in this room long enough to have seen that. Marcus kept his expression still. Beside him, Vanessa had registered the same exchange. He could tell by the way her hand tightened slightly around her glass. Not fear, not panic, just the recognition of a person who had spent the last 3 months watching Damien work and knew exactly what that conversation was beginning to build toward. "He's going to say something," she said quietly. "I know," Marcus said. "Whatever he says, Vanessa." He turned to look at her directly. "Whatever he says is going to be true. I'm not going to stand here and pretend otherwise, so before he says it, you should know that every part of tonight that mattered to me was real. The rest of it was just how it started." She looked at him. Before she could respond, Damien's voice carried across the nearest cluster of guests, not raised, not dramatic, just projected with the ease of a man who had learned long ago that the most damaging things could be said in a completely pleasant tone. "Oh, I think there might be some confusion. Marcus actually came here alone tonight. I noticed him earlier sitting by himself before the evening got started." A small apologetic laugh. "I just don't want anyone working from the wrong information." The room didn't go silent, but the particular cluster of people around them went quiet in that specific way that meant the information was already moving. Heads turned. The blonde woman said something behind her hand that produced a ripple of reaction. Damien stood at the center of it with his wine glass and his pleasant expression, and for the first time all evening he looked satisfied. Marcus stood still. He didn't look away from Damien. He didn't look at the people looking at him. He just waited, and he was aware in the long beat of silence that followed that the next few seconds would determine how the rest of this night ended. Marcus turned to Vanessa. She was looking at the floor not in shame, but in the way a person looks at something neutral when they need a second to decide what their face is going to do. He watched her take one slow breath, then another. Then she looked up, not at him, at the room. At Damien standing in the center of his small, satisfied audience, at the blonde woman still talking behind her hand, at the cluster of faces that had turned with the particular eagerness of people who had been waiting all evening for the story to arrive at its most useful moment. Marcus watched her take all of it in the full weight of it, the specific quality of humiliation that came not from cruelty, but from precision. Damien had not lied. That was the architecture of it. He had simply handed the room a true thing at exactly the moment it would do the most damage. "I should go," Marcus said quietly. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. "I've made this harder for you. That wasn't—" "Don't." He stopped. Vanessa said it again, softer this time, but with something underneath it that was not soft at all. "Don't." She set her glass down on the nearest surface. She smoothed the front of her gown once, a small, precise gesture, the movement of a person settling into themselves before they do something they've decided to do. Then she turned to face the room. "He's right," she said. Her voice was not loud. She didn't need it to be. The particular silence that had gathered around them carried it. "Marcus isn't my fiancé." She looked at Damien as she said it steady, unhurried, giving him nothing that looked like distress. "My grandmother asked him to stand with me tonight because she was worried about me walking into this room alone. She was right to worry." A brief pause. "And he said yes." She let that sit for a moment. "I've known most of you for years," she continued. "Some of you were at my birthday dinner last March. Some of you were at the Hargrove event in September, the one I organized." She did not raise her voice. She did not perform emotion she wasn't feeling. She just spoke plainly the way a person speaks when they have finally decided that plain is enough. "And tonight, the only person in this room who treated me like I was worth a damn was a man I met 2 hours ago." She looked at Damien once more. "So thank you for making that the clearest it's ever been." Damien's expression did not collapse. But something went out of it, some essential quality of certainty, some core assumption that had been load-bearing, and what was left was just a man holding a wine glass with nothing left to do with it. The blonde woman had stopped talking. The room was very quiet. Marcus didn't move for a moment. He had come into this evening as an accidental participant in someone else's story, and he had understood somewhere in the past few hours that he had stopped being accidental. But understanding a thing and knowing what to do with it were different problems, and he was still working through the second one when Vanessa turned back to him. Her expression was different now. Not the composed, managed face she had been wearing since she walked through the door, not the careful neutrality of someone navigating a room that wished her ill. This was her actual face, the one that had been there in the corridor in the quiet moments between the performance of the evening. It was steadier than he expected, and tireder and more open. "You were going to leave," she said. "I thought it was the right call," he said. "It wasn't." "I know that now." She looked at him for a moment. "You said something before he came over. You said every part of tonight that mattered to you was real." "Yes." What did that mean? Marcus had spent a significant portion of the last 4 years not saying the things that were true, because the things that were true had a way of opening doors he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through. It was a habit that had served him well in certain ways and cost him in others, and he was aware standing here that he was at the exact kind of threshold where the habit was going to win or it wasn't. He looked at her. "It meant that I came here tonight to do someone a favor," he said. "And somewhere in the middle of it, I stopped thinking about the favor." He paused. "I started thinking about you, not the situation you. The way you moved through a room, the things you noticed, the way you said what you just said and meant every word of it and didn't need anyone to validate it." He let out a slow breath. "I don't know what that is. I'm not going to call it something it hasn't had time to be yet. But I know I don't want tonight to be the end of it." Vanessa was quiet. He kept going because he was already through the door, and there was no point stopping halfway. "I'm also aware that I'm a single father who drove here in a 6-year-old Accord and wore the wrong jacket to this party. I'm not this." He gestured at the room. "I'm not any of this. And if that's a reason, I understand it. I just needed you to know that the reason wasn't me." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't care about the jacket." Something in Marcus's chest loosened in a way he hadn't expected to feel tonight. "The Accord is a problem, though," she said. He looked at her. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close enough that it was unmistakably one. "I'm kidding," she said. "I drive a Civic." Marcus laughed, a real one, quiet and unprepared, the kind that came out before a person decided to let it. Vanessa watched it happen with an expression that was still careful, still measuring, but had a warmth in it now that hadn't been there 2 hours ago. She was not a person who opened easily. He understood that. She was a person who had learned to be thorough about who she let pass the door, and the learning had not been painless. But she was still standing here, and she hadn't looked away. Eleanor appeared at the edge of the room. Marcus noticed her before Vanessa did, standing just at the border of the main floor near the entrance to the corridor, watching. She was very still. She had the expression of a woman who had set something in motion a long time ago and was now watching it arrive at a destination she had hoped for, but not guaranteed. When she saw Marcus looking at her, she didn't smile. She just held his gaze for a moment, and in that moment, Marcus understood something about why she had chosen him. Not just because he was quiet, not just because he was the only person in the room not performing, but because she had looked at him and seen someone who was still there, even when there was nothing to gain from being there, and she had decided that was the thing her granddaughter needed most. He gave Eleanor a small nod. She looked at her granddaughter, then back at him. Then she turned and walked back into the crowd, unhurried, finished. The party ended the way large parties always did, slowly, unevenly in groups of 2 and 4, with the particular exhaustion of people who had maintained themselves for several hours in a row. The string quartet packed up. The catering staff began a quiet, efficient dismantling of the evening. Damien left early. Marcus didn't see him go, but he noticed the absence, the way a specific kind of pressure went out of the room, the way Vanessa's shoulders dropped by a fraction of an inch when it happened. She noticed him noticing. "He left," she said. "I know. Does that feel like a victory to you?" Marcus thought about it. "No," he said. "It feels like the evening just became about what it was actually about." Vanessa considered this. Which is what? 2 people who didn't expect to meet each other tonight. She was quiet for a moment. Around them, the last of the guests were collecting their things, saying their goodbyes, performing the final small rituals of a social evening coming to a close. The room that had been enormous and charged and full of watching eyes was becoming just a room, just a large, emptying space with good lighting and the lingering smell of something expensive. "I don't do this easily," Vanessa said. She was not looking at him when she said it. She was looking at the room. "I want you to know that going in, I'm not..." She paused. "I've been careful, for good reasons, and I don't want to pretend the reasons have gone away." "They haven't," Marcus said. "I'm not asking you to pretend anything." She looked at him then. "What are you asking?" "Dinner," he said. "Somewhere that doesn't have a string quartet. Just the 2 of us, no one else's agenda, and you can decide somewhere in the middle of it whether any of this makes sense." Vanessa looked at him for a long time, the full, careful assessment of a person who had spent a long time being thorough about who she let pass the door. Then she said, "No tea." "I only drink tea at parties where I don't know anyone." "Then you'll have to drink something else." "I can do that," Marcus said. Outside, the night was clear and cold, the kind of cold that made everything feel sharper. The streetlights, the sound of the city, the particular quality of a moment that had arrived without any of the planning that moments usually require. Marcus stood on the steps of the building and waited while Vanessa said goodbye to Eleanor, who held her granddaughter's hands for a moment and said something that made Vanessa close her eyes briefly and then nod. Eleanor did not look at Marcus again before she got into her car. She didn't need to. Vanessa came down the steps and stopped beside him. "She says you're a good man," she said. "She doesn't know me," Marcus said. "No," Vanessa agreed. "But she was right about you tonight." They stood there for a moment, not performing anything for anyone, not managing any room. Just 2 people standing outside in the cold at the end of an evening that had not gone the way either of them had planned. "Dinner," Vanessa said. "Thursday." "Thursday," Marcus said. They walked in opposite directions to their cars. And for the first time all evening, neither of them was bracing for anything. Sometimes the person who changes everything doesn't arrive with fanfare. They arrived quietly at a corner table with a cup of tea, not trying to be anything at all. Marcus didn't set out to be anyone's hero that night. He just decided not to look the other way, and that was enough. If this story stayed with you, if you believe that ordinary decency still matters, that the right person can show up in the most unexpected moment, then this channel is for you. Subscribe, and every week we'll bring you another story worth remembering.